The courage to be soft. Why your greatest strength might be the one you're hiding. I recently had the privilege of sitting down with Paula Lynch, and I need to tell you something about her. Paula isn't just another voice in the crowded space of leadership and empowerment. She's a visionary who is fundamentally reshaping how Black women navigate professional spaces, entrepreneurship, and the courageous journey towards softness. Her work is creating ripples that are becoming waves, waves that are challenging centuries of conditioning, waves that are giving permission to an entire generation of women to finally put themselves first. Paula Lynch is the kind of leader who doesn't just talk about transformation, she embodies it, she lives it. And in our conversation, she shared insights that have the power to shift not just individual lives, but the trajectory of entire communities. Let me start with something Paula said that made me stop, rewind, and listen 3 more times. She told me that embracing softness and vulnerability is not a sign of weakness, but a radical act of self preservation and leadership for Black women navigating professional and entrepreneurial spaces. Now, I want you to really sit with that for a moment. In a society that constantly rewards us for our resilience, for our ability to carry others, for our strength in the face of unimaginable adversity, Paula is saying that choosing to honor our own boundaries and needs isn't just acceptable, it's courageous, it's transformative, it's the path to deeper fulfillment and authentic success. This idea flies in the face of everything many of us have been taught. We've been conditioned to believe that to be strong means to be unbreakable, that to be a leader means to sacrifice ourselves for others, that to be valuable means to keep giving until there's nothing left. We've been taught that our worth is measured by how much we can endure, how much we can carry, how much we can do for everyone else while neglecting ourselves. But what if the very thing we've been running from, our softness, our vulnerability, our need for rest and boundaries, is actually our greatest source of power? What if the cape we've been wearing, the superwoman cape that society handed us without asking if we even wanted it, is the very thing that's suffocating us? Paula shared 3 key insights with me that I believe every person listening needs to hear, needs to write down, needs to tattoo on their hearts. First, softness is strength. True power comes from honoring your emotions, setting boundaries, and prioritizing your well being, even when the world expects you to be unbreakable. Second, loss can be a catalyst for rebirth. When you're stripped of what's familiar, career stability, identity is an opportunity to rediscover your authentic self and rebuild from a place of alignment, not just survival. And third, entrepreneurship is often born from necessity, not luxury. For many Black women, starting a business isn't about chasing glamour, but about reclaiming agency in the face of systemic inequities and instability. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. This sounds nice, but is it real? Is this just feel good talk? Or is there actual evidence that this matters? Let me ground these insights in reality, because Paula didn't just share theory with me. She shared evidence. She shared stories. She shared numbers that should make every single one of us pay attention. In 2025, more than 300,000 Black women were laid off or pushed out of the US workforce. 300,000. Let that number land. Let it sink into your bones. These weren't just statistics on a spreadsheet. These weren't just numbers in a report. These were mothers who had to explain to their children why they couldn't afford the things they used to afford. These were daughters who had worked their entire lives to make their families proud. These were sisters who had been the backbone of their communities. These were leaders who had given everything to organizations that discarded them without a second thought. These were innovators who had ideas that could change the world, but were never given the platform to share them. They were pushed out of government, tech, healthcare, and education. They faced biased hiring systems that were designed to keep them out. They faced wage gaps that are nothing short of criminal, earning $54,000 while their white male counterparts earned $90,000 for doing the exact same work, bringing the exact same value, sometimes even less. They faced limited opportunities for advancement, glass ceilings that were really concrete walls, and systems that were never built with them in mind. But here's where the story gets interesting. Here's where Paula's insights about loss being a catalyst for rebirth come alive. Here's where we see softness transforming into strength right before our eyes. These women didn't just disappear, they didn't just give up, they didn't just accept the narrative that they weren't good enough, weren't qualified enough, weren't valuable enough. 59% started businesses or freelance work, 52% switched to industries entirely, 30% retrained or returned to school. They leaned on networks, faith, and community for support. They turned their pain into purpose. They transformed their loss into a launching pad. They took their trauma and turned it into testimony. This wasn't entrepreneurship born from privilege. This wasn't the glamorous startup story you see on magazine covers. This wasn't venture capital and business school dreams and fancy pitch decks. This was entrepreneurship born from necessity, from survival, from a refusal to let systemic inequities have the final word, from a deep knowing that if the system won't make space for you, you have to create your own space. And what happened? A surge in Black women's entrepreneurship that is reshaping the narrative around Black women's leadership and economic agency in the United States. Paula helped me understand that this wave of entrepreneurship isn't just about business, it's not just about revenue and profit margins and market share, it's about reclaiming agency. It's about saying if the system won't make space for me, I'll create my own space. If the world won't value my contributions, I'll build something where my value is undeniable. If they won't give me a seat at the table, I'll build my own table and I'll decide who gets to sit there. This is softness as strength in action. This is vulnerability transformed into power. This is what happens when you stop playing by rules that were never designed for you to win. But let's dig deeper because the barriers these women face are real and they're staggering. Research from the National Bureau of Economic Research shows that Black entrepreneurs start businesses at a 22% lower rate than whites, and Black women face even steeper barriers in accessing capital and networks. Think about that. Before they even start, the odds are stacked against them. Black women founders face higher failure rates, less access to venture capital, and more frequent credit rejections. The deck isn't just stacked against them, it's rigged. When Black women walk into a bank asking for a loan, they're more likely to be rejected. When they pitch to investors, they're more likely to be dismissed. When they try to access the same networks and resources that their counterparts take for granted, they're more likely to be told no, not qualified, not the right fit, not right now. Yet, despite these obstacles, despite a system that seems determined to keep them out, Black women entrepreneurs are leveraging alternative funding sources. They're building strong community networks. They're focusing on industries where they can create immediate impact. They're finding ways around the barriers because going through them is proven impossible. And here's what's remarkable. Here's what should make every investor and every institution pay attention. Female founded VC backed startups have demonstrated higher exit rates than their representation would suggest. When given the opportunity, when given even a fraction of the resources their counterparts receive, when someone finally says yes instead of no, Black women don't just survive, they thrive, they excel, they outperform. They prove that the problem was never their capability, it was always the system's inability to recognize their value. Paula emphasized something crucial here. She said, this isn't about being superhuman, it's about being human. It's about honoring the full spectrum of who we are, including our need for rest, for boundaries, for softness. Because the truth is, persistent wealth gaps, limited access to family business experience, and systemic discrimination have historically hindered Black women's entrepreneurial journeys. These are not personal failings, these are structural barriers. And recognizing them, naming them, calling them out is the first step toward dismantling them. Let me share one more piece of evidence that Paula brought to my attention because it illustrates just how urgent this conversation is, just how critical this moment is, just how much is at stake. Black women in California experience a wage gap so wide it would take nearly 100 years to close at the current rate. 100 years. That means the granddaughters of women working today will still be fighting for equal pay. That means generations of talent, brilliance, and contribution will continue to be undervalued. That means the system is not broken. It's working exactly as it was designed to work. 60% of Black women reported workplace discrimination in the past year. 60%. That's not a minority experience, that's the majority. Only 21% believed they had strong opportunities for advancement. Only 21% felt like their hard work would actually lead somewhere, like their dreams were actually achievable within the systems they were working in. These numbers should outrage us. They should move us to action. They should make us question every assumption we have about meritocracy and fairness and equal opportunity. But they should also help us understand why so many Black women are choosing to step away from traditional employment and create their own paths. This isn't about rejecting work. It's about rejecting systems that refuse to value their work. It's about choosing dignity over degradation. It's about choosing alignment over survival. It's about choosing themselves finally after years of choosing everyone else. In response to these conditions, many Black women have turned to entrepreneurship, retraining, and advocacy, using their experiences to fuel change both personally and within their communities. This movement has led to increased visibility of Black women's contributions, the creation of new support networks, and a growing demand for systemic reform. The establishment of new businesses, community organizations, and advocacy efforts led by Black women has shifted public discourse and policy focus. It's changing what's possible, it's rewriting the rules. Paula helped me see that this is what rebirth looks like. This is what happens when loss strips away everything that wasn't serving you and forces you to rebuild from a place of truth. This is the power of embracing softness, of honoring your boundaries, of prioritizing your healing, and trusting that your vulnerability is your greatest source of power. Throughout our conversation, Paula kept returning to this idea that softness is not weakness. She said it's a radical act of self love. It's a refusal to participate in systems that demand you sacrifice yourself for their benefit. It's a commitment to showing up as your whole self, not just the parts that are convenient or comfortable for others, not just the parts that make other people feel safe, not just the parts that don't challenge the status quo. This is especially important for Black women who have been conditioned to be strong, to be resilient, to carry everyone else's burdens. Paula is saying, what if you put that cape down? What if you stopped trying to save everyone else and started saving yourself? What if you recognized that your healing, your rest, your joy, your peace are not selfish indulgences, but sacred necessities? What if you understood that you cannot pour from an empty cup and your cup has been empty for far too long? The women who were laid off in 2025, the women who faced discrimination and wage gaps and limited opportunities, they didn't have the luxury of waiting for the system to change. They had to create change themselves. And in doing so, they discovered something profound. They discovered that entrepreneurship, that building something of their own, wasn't just about making money. It was about reclaiming their identity. It was about defining success on their own terms. It was about creating space for softness in a world that demanded hardness. It was about proving to themselves that they were worthy, valuable, capable, not because a system validated them, but because they validated themselves. Paula's insights remind us that we are not responsible for everyone else's healing. We are not required to be unbreakable. We are not obligated to sacrifice our well being for systems that don't value us. Our only responsibility is to ourselves and our peace. And when we honor that responsibility, when we choose softness over survival, when we set boundaries without apology and rest without explanation, we don't just transform our own lives. We create a blueprint for others to follow. We give permission to the women watching us, the daughters learning from us, the sisters walking beside us to choose themselves too. The broader impact of this movement, this wave of Black women choosing themselves, includes economic empowerment, cultural change, and a redefinition of what leadership and success look like. It's a collective awakening. It's a recognition that true strength isn't about how much you can endure, but about how well you can honor your own needs. It's about understanding that vulnerability isn't a liability, it's a superpower. It's about knowing that the world needs your softness just as much as it needs your strength, maybe even more. So here's what I want you to do. Here's the challenge I'm leaving you with today, the one that Paula left me with, the one that has been echoing in my mind and heart ever since our conversation. I want you to identify one area of your life where you've been performing strength instead of practicing softness. One place where you've been saying yes when your body is screaming no. One relationship where you've been giving more than you're receiving. One job where you've been tolerating disrespect because you're afraid of what leaving might cost you. One dream you've been delaying because you're too busy taking care of everyone else. And then I want you to make a decision, not tomorrow, not next week, not when things calm down or when you have more time or when everyone else is okay. Today, right now, in this moment. Choose softness, choose yourself, choose to honor your boundaries, to prioritize your healing, to trust that your vulnerability is not a weakness to hide, but a strength to celebrate. Because here's the truth that Paula taught me, the truth that those 300,000 Black women demonstrated through their courage and resilience and transformation. When you choose softness, when you honor your truth, when you prioritize your well being, you don't become weaker. You become more powerful. You become more authentic. You become more aligned with who you were always meant to be. The world may have taught you survival, but you were made for so much more than just surviving. You were made to thrive. You were made to lead. You were made to be soft and strong, vulnerable and powerful, human and divine, all at the same time. So take off the cape. Put down the weight you were never meant to carry. Step into your soft girl era, not as an escape from responsibility, but as a return to your true self. Not as weakness, but as the most courageous act of leadership you will ever undertake. The world is waiting for the real you, the soft you, the whole you. The you that doesn't apologize for needing rest, doesn't explain why you set boundaries, doesn't justify why you chose yourself. And when you show up as that version of yourself, when you give yourself permission to be soft, you don't just change your own life, you change the world.